As the 2010 cycling season winds to a close, one major rendezvous remains in France, and all the riders have high motivation to end their season with a win. Paris Tours is a flat course which sets up for the sprinters to go head-to-head. But the breakaway riders will be on the attack to try and steal their thunder.
And Gilbert takes it on the line. The sprinters were robbed, and boy, they made a big mistake when they allowed those boys to go. Gilbert, the look on his face, he's going to win this for the second year in a row, and he does. Well, that is amazing.
The man with the bullseye on his back, Belgian superstar Philippe Gilbert, has won the last two runnings of this race, but nobody has ever achieved 3 in a row. The 104th edition of the Autumn Classic Paris Tours is next on Versus. It's the autumn of the cycling season, and of course when it comes around, it's Paris Tours, and that is one of the last races on the international calendar. Hello everybody, welcome to Epic Cycle Sundays presented by Loupe Ultra. I'm Paul Sherwen, and alongside me is Bob Roll. And yes, a very long race in store for the riders, 145 miles of racing. And Bob, I have to say, it really is a race that the sprinters always try and dominate in.
The rest of the classics, very arduous. It takes a different type of rider than the pure sprinter to win the other classics. But this race, Paris Tours, is for the classics. The profile is almost dead flat. There's a couple of small climbs in the finale, but it's historically been for the sprinters. Probably the most notable thing about it, it was the only race to elude the great Eddy Merckx in his career. He could never win Paris Tours. The sprinters dominate this event over the years.
They do, but it is a very important race too for the last chance for many of these riders. It gets them into the limelight with the possibility of trying to sign that final contract before the 2011 season. It is a very difficult race, I have to say, Bob. As far as I'm concerned, when you look at the profile, yes, it's flat, but it's all about those final few climbs.
There are a series of small climbs at the finish just before the end, and it's very long, 144.8 miles. Also, it comes very late in the season, so a lot of endurance required to make the distance. Then, of course, there are a couple of staccato bursts of short climbs just before the finish line.
Yes, but I'll tell you one thing, the end of the season over the last couple of years has been dominated by one man, and that, of course, is Philippe Gilbert, which is why this week he's going to be our Loupe Ultra athlete profile.
Philippe Gilbert, twice winner of this event, both the last year and the year before that. Also won the Tour of Lombardia, was on an absolute tear in the finale of last year's season. He's on good form. He was at a good World Championships, and he's won 2 stages of the Vuelta just a few weeks ago.
2 challenges and men looking for a bit of revenge coming out of last weekend's World Championships. Pippo Pozzato, 4th last weekend, and looking to some redemption for Team Italia. And of course, Oscar Freire, 6th at the World Championships last year, but always very good. So as we look at this leading group of 8 riders, I can tell you that all of the favourites are stuck in the main field at around about 1 minute and 10 seconds. A quick run through of the leaders: Travis Meyer of Garmin, Jens Jorgensen, Nicolas Mais, Alexis Saramontins, who's the rider from HTC just going through the screen, Juan Antonio Fletcher, Yuri Christoph, Simon Gesch and Laurent Pichon. Now these riders broke clear after about 70 kilometres, built themselves a maximum advantage of 3 minutes at one stage, but Bob, for around about 70 or 80 kilometres, it hovered at the 2 to 3 minute mark. Now I think the main field are starting to take this 8-man breakaway seriously.
1 minute and 7 is the gap, negotiating a pretty dangerous little traffic island right there out on the course. The rider of most notoriety in the breakaway is probably Juan Antonio Fletcher, breakaway specialist. He's won some classics in his career, including Het Volk, which is now called Het Nieuwsblad, in the springtime. Similar sort of race course, some short climbs before the finale, but most notably a very long, tough day in the saddle, over 144 miles out on the race course.
Well, it's a very, very long main field there, being stretched out by the pressure coming from the front, not surprisingly by Team Lotto, and that's the team of Philippe Gilbert. He rode superbly last week. I have to say he was probably one of the strongest riders in the World Championships, but I think the climb was just a little bit too far from the finish.
For Gilbert, the end of the season, it always provides him with tremendous motivation, and last year, this time of the year, he was on an absolute tear, winning 4 big races to cap off his season last year, including the great one-day classic, the Giro of Lombardia.
Yes, but the thing about Gilbert is that every year he misses out on riding the Tour de France so that he can actually build his form up for this end of the season, for the one-day classics. He really has become superb at that, just getting his form to perfection. Now, we always talk about Paris Tours, Bob, as being a race for the sprinters, yet in the last few years, I think 7 times in the last few years, it's been dominated by a breakaway right down towards the end.
7 out of 10 of the last Paris Tours, a little breakaway has succeeded at the very end of the race, including, most shockingly, was Richard Virenque, who's best known for his climbing skills in the Tour de France, winning the King of the Mountain competition in that. But there are a couple of sharp little climbs just before the finish that have occasionally given the breakaway a chance to win. 7 out of the last 10, so you can't discount a little breakaway being able to succeed. That was a tricky little move by Robbie McEwen there, going off the side of the road to move into a good position. So what you want to do in these long races is continue to try to improve your position and save as much energy for the finishing sprint, and Robbie McEwen is a specialist at that.
Well, you can see the damage that's being done at the back end of the main field. The only sprinters actually to win here in the last 10 years have been Alessandro Petacchi and Eric Zabel on 2 occasions. But I have a feeling today we will again see that attack coming on those final little climbs towards the end. The teams of the sprinters have to remain nice and calm if they can, and then pull the late attackers back into the main field before the finishing line. That very, very famous long run up to the line of the Avenue de Grammont. Welcome back. We're looking at the front end of the main field, and we're looking now at a gap which is starting to plummet, and that's really because of the work that's being done by Omega Pharma Lotto. Bob, I think everybody believes that Philippe Gilbert is the #1 favourite to win this race. The sprinters we were talking about a little earlier, riders like Eric Zabel, now retired, Alessandro Petacchi put a close to his season. Tyler Farrar, I think at the end of a very long, hard season, not here, but there's still some very fast sprinters. But everybody, I think, is going to be looking for the wheel of Philippe Gilbert, who I am sure will attack on one of these final 2 climbs.
Here's your breakaway group. Also not in the race this year is Mark Cavendish. He's contesting the Commonwealth Games down in India, I believe it is. So the fastest man in the world, you can't argue with that, Mark Cavendish. This would be a great race for him to win and put on his Palmares eventually, but so late in the season, a lot of the sprinters that concentrate on the Grand Tours where they can win multiple stages, not here in Paris Tours.
Little problem here, and this is somebody who's had a mechanical incident. This is Marco Marcato from Team Vacances Soleil. They've got a chance of a win this afternoon, I would have to say, with Romain Felu, because he has got some very good end of the season form. And
Bjorn Leukemans, his teammate on that squad, was 3rd in this event last year. So Vacances Soleil hoping eventually to get a ride in the Tour de France, and a very good squad and a very quick wheel change there. Good work by the mechanic on Vacances Soleil. Mercado should be able to get back into the field in no time at all.
Quick one. He'll use the team cars, the convoy of cars behind. The race referees will turn a blind eye, especially because of the fact that he's had a mechanical incident. But at speeds like this, Bob, even when you do get a quick wheel change, it's very difficult to get back into the main field. It's going to take him between 3 and 5 kilometers.
And 32 kilometers to go. That's not where you want to find yourself chasing to get back into the group. Fanning out a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me too much, Paul, if they slowed down a wee bit and let the breakaway stay out there for a few more kilometers, and they don't catch them too far away from the finish line, which would give other breakaways a chance to attack.
Well, Team Radio Shack are very keen to send 1 or 2 riders to the front end, and I'm sure that's for their big sprinter, Gerd Steegmans. He's not really had a great season, not the season I think they expected from him, but he's a strong bike rider. He'll be able to get over these climbs down towards the end, and of course a good win for him at the end of the season wouldn't be too bad for Radio Shack either.
Almost certainly that'd be a great result for Steegmans. He's got a lot of endurance for a sprinter. He can go the distance. Also won the last stage of the Tour de France a couple of years ago in Paris after a great sprint. So watch for Gerd Steegmans in the finale.
Well, this is a 3rd climb before the end, the Côte de Crochou. Now, this is a good move to try and split this breakaway, get it down to a much more manageable size. The rider from Skill Shimano here is Simon Grech. Not a surprise at all there to see, Bob, the chase being taken up by Juan Antonio Fletcher. But the main field are now only looking for 33 seconds.
33 seconds down, and these are the last couple of climbs just before the finish that we were talking about. And after 200+ kilometers, that really stings the leg. So Gesky off the front there, being chased by Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Well, you can see it has caused a big split in the main field, and the other rider coming across there, the quick-step rider, Nicholas Mais. Now, this is the front end of the main field. Looked like Sorensen trying to go clear in second position there, and they too have managed to get a little bit of an advantage over the front end of the main field. To me, though, Bob, this is not the decisive climb. It's the next climb with around about 6 or 7 kilometers to go, which is the more important climb to launch an attack.
Definitely. We'll see what happens to the breakaway here. It's definitely splitting up, and you can see the riders that were previously with the leaders are now just a little bit behind. We'll see what kind of cooperation they can do. Simon Geske made a good maneuver there and gave them the slip to his breakaway companions. These attacks here, it's going to split the field up a little bit, and it'll definitely chop into the lead of the breakaway.
Well, you see the main field, they're not that concerned, I don't think, about the composition of this small four-man breakaway going off the front, because they've spread all over the road there. That'll mean that they'll turn off the pressure for a fraction, and these guys very shortly will be, I think, left to right to the finish on their own. This is the Arrière de la Course at the back end of the bike race, so that little climb did create some damage.
They are dropped right straight off the back of this climb, and they'll probably just noodle it in for the last 18 miles. Hopefully all the water in the showers will not have gone cold by the time they get to Tours for the finish.
Well, everybody's scrambling to get back on par there. You can see the two leaders, two riders coming halfway across the gap, and I think everybody else, Bob, has put up the white flag of surrender as we look back. That's the chasing group of 4 riders. They're halfway across the gap. And there is the main field now. The gap now is starting to stretch out again. I think you're right. I think the main field, Bob, will wait and leave these guys out there to just to hover a little bit and try and catch before that final big climb. And that's the most strategically important point of the race. So as the race starts to fragment at the front end, we'll take a very short break. Come back shortly. So welcome back. We're looking here at the 2 leaders. They're being chased by 2 other riders who we haven't managed to see who that is at the moment. But 30 seconds, 28 kilometers to go. It's all looking good for the big favorites in the main field. And just run through some of the names, because this, although there are 1 or 2 big names missing, is a field of very high quality. Of course, Philippe Gilbert is here. Pipo Pozzato is in the main field. I suppose, Bob, I'd have to say a big question mark over Tom Bonen, because nobody really knows what his form is like at the end of the season. Oscar Freire, Matti Breschel, Alessandro Ballan. It's a big quality field. But what about Tom Bonen?
Tom Bonen could uncork one here. He's got a great sprint, tremendous endurance. It's a perfect race course for Bonen, and he was so close to winning last year. That might be in the back of his mind throughout today's race. If I can go about 2 centimeters quicker, I'll be able to win Paris Tours, and for Tom Bonen, that would be a great finish to his season.
Well, this is the rider from AG2R who was in that leading group, and this is Yuri Krivtsov. He's about to get picked up by the remnants of the breakaway. So still 2 leaders off the front end of the main field. Now, Bob, a lot of discussions at the moment about Alberto Contador. It is still an ongoing investigation into the microscopic traces of clenbuterol in his blood system. And after all, Bob, I didn't know what 40 picograms were until last week.
It's an incredibly microscopic amount, and definitely the yellow jersey is in peril right now to be lost by Alberto Contador after an incredible battle with Andy Schleck throughout the 3 weeks of July, and we'll have to see how it plays out. And I've been very mystified by the trace amounts, and it's happened to other athletes recently in cycling, but of course none of them have won the Tour de France, so now it's dominating the headlines the last few weeks.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Bob, I will always give the athlete the benefit of the doubt. Cast your mind back to 2008. There was an American swimmer who was prevented from swimming in the Olympic Games in Beijing because they found traces of clenbuterol in her urine sample as well. After the Olympic Games, she proved her innocence. There was actually trace elements in a food supplement she was taking, but at the end of the day, the rule stipulates that the athlete is completely responsible for everything the athlete ingests. I think sometimes that can be a little bit unfair.
Most definitely. You have to be so incredibly careful, and the testing now is so sophisticated and so sensitive to trace amounts. You have to absolutely, I mean, you can't carry a microphone around you, a microscope around with you to all the bike races. And in the fight against doping, sometimes you have innocent victims, and cycling is a sport that does more than any other sport to provide an authentic spectacle for the fans, and let's hope that they can resolve everything. I'm not sure if it'll go in the favor of Alberto Contador, because this fight against doping in our sport has been going on for a long time, and all of the governing bodies are deeply entrenched and hopeful that what you see is real. What you see is the athlete's God-given talent, and that is the best way for anybody to appreciate a professional sport.
I totally agree with you, but I'll tell you you one thing, Bob. I'm fairly certain that in NHL, basketball or baseball, nobody would have announced 40 picograms of clenbuterol in somebody's sample. Anyway, let's get back to Paris Tours, because that's what we're here about this afternoon. We're looking at 26 kilometers to go to the finish. Just still hanging on to inside of that 30-second advantage. This is Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's trying to make the junction to the two riders just around the corner. This is an ideal situation for the Spaniard.
That's Fletcher trying to come across to Mize here, and the skilled Shimano rider as well, Simon Geske. So this is our two leaders. They were in a big breakaway with the two chasers. The others have been swept up. There is a little group that's launched off the front of the peloton, and they are trying to get back up to our leaders. This is that group. They have just come out of the peloton there. One of Philippe Gilbert's teammates from the Omega Pharma squad is also in this breakaway. B-Box Telecom also in the break. A lot of French teams and French riders. Of course, it's Paris Tours, and they would love to get a result in today's race.
No, they certainly would. This is the group that's halfway across the gap. There's the banner indicating 25 kilometers to go to the finish. The two climbs down towards the end, which I regard as being the leapfrog points, are the Côte de Beausoleil, which is coming in around about 11 kilometers time, and that's followed very rapidly 3 kilometers further on by the Côte de l'Épont. Now, that's the point to make the move, and that's why I think today Philippe Gilbert has got a very good chance of writing some history, because he's got the ability to hold his effort from that final climb right the way down onto the Avenue de Grammont. That's what he's looking for, and if he wins this race, nobody ever has won this race 3 times in a row previously. So as we look at the group halfway across the gap is slowly starting to come down. We'll take a very short break. Well, actually, as we were away for the break, the two chasers just managed to reintegrate, so we're now looking at a leading group of 4 riders. There is still a group halfway across the gap at around about 20 seconds, and then the main field back at 28 seconds. So now Nicolas Maes has been joined by Alexis Saramotins and, of course, by Juan Antonio Fletcher. This is the chasing group halfway across the gap. In fact, the rider at the back here, the HTC Columbia rider, is the national champion of Latvia, but he also just recently, Bob, won the Grand Prix of Isberg, which is another good end-of-season French classic. Alexis
Saramotins is the rider from HTC, so a name to look forward in the future. There's the peloton on the far right-hand corner, and the breakaway that is trying to get across to our 4 leaders. So 3 groups out on the open roads right now. We have 23 kilometers to go. And this is the fight for position. Now the sprinters, it seems like they just make a mad dash to the finishing line in the last couple of 100 meters, but that has already started. And so what's important now is to maintain your position and try to continue to move to the front every chance you get. You do not want to be here stuck at the back of the field. That is a very tough way to start a sprint. And when 23 kilometers to go, the field starts to go so incredibly quickly that it's almost impossible to move up just one spot, let alone 250 guys.
Well, in fact, we're getting a time check there on the blackboard, which says that this leading group of 4 riders has got 20 seconds over the chasers and 45 seconds back to the main field. I'm not quite sure I believe that gap, because it looks to me as if it's a lot shorter. This is a very good situation for Juan Antonio Fletcher, because if he can start the next part of this race, the strategic 2 climbs on the run in towards the finish, that gives him a chance to leapfrog to a solo victory.
Well, if he can try to sit on the wheels as best he can, wait for this group of chasers to come across. That's a pretty big group, and that might have a chance to stay away. That would be about 10 or 12 guys, and that have a much better opportunity to stay with than just the 4 men who have been out on the breakaway throughout the race.
Well, I don't know how that happened, Bob. I think it was, in fact, that traffic island there. This looks to me as if this is Stéphane Bonsargent from the Bretagne team. And you see, at this speed, all of a sudden, if you're not paying attention, one of those traffic islands comes up and bang, you're down very quickly indeed.
Yes, riders diving out of the way of those in the front of the peloton, and when you get down the echelon, down the line until you're about 180th or so, you never see those. You just plow right into them, and it's easy to crash in these roundabouts. And the battle for position, that's what makes this race so hard at the end of a very tough season and the end of a lot of miles out on the open road.
There's a lot of arm gesturing going on there, and that really, I think, I was just looking to see a few moments ago, the Lotto rider in there was Jürgen Rolands, but he may well have sat up, Bob, to go back to the main field, because this race is very much all about Philippe Gilbert for Omega Pharma Lotto. Here are the 4 leaders. Everybody appears to be working extremely well together. The big favourite, number 131, Juan Antonio Fletcher, started the season off in great manner for Team Sky with that win in Het Nieuwsblad.
Het Nieuwsblad had a big classic in the spring, yeah.
One of those rare Spanish riders who rides well in the one-day classics. Normally we regard the Spaniards as stage race riders and mountain climbers, but Fletcher, he's not that kind of man, is he?
No, he's on the podium in Paris-Roubaix in his career also, so he loves the one-day classics. He loves the bad weather. He loves the crosswinds and the cobblestones. That makes him a very rare bird in Spanish cycling. Generally speaking, the Spaniards much better at the big stage races than the long climbs.
Well, there are 7 riders there halfway across the gap, and there's a lot of anger at the front end of the main field. It's extremely organized. They're now waiting till they get to this next climb of the day, and it's a very important strategic point as far as I'm concerned, the Côte de Beausoleil, because it's a short climb and then very quickly followed by the Côte de l'Épon. Look at the faces of the riders here. That's Roland's over on the left-hand side. He won't be doing too much work in this breakaway group, Bob. In fact, I would think he's probably trying to slow them down, and there's the main field. They've got what they want, and look at this, Rabobank at the front.
Oscar Freire, yeah, absolutely. Hoping for a good result here. Oscar Freire won Milano-San Remo this spring. It's a similar type of race. And of course, it's a much more well-known race. Milano-San Remo, one of the monuments of cycling, won by Oscar Freire from the Rabobank squad this spring.
Only 4 riders now remain off the front end of the main field with a 17-second advantage at 20 kilometers to go. We'll take a very short break, come back with a couple of climbs. So welcome back. We're looking at this leading group of 4 riders, Bob. I think we've got a status quo here. The front end of the main field that can see their prey. We're in the wide open part of Tours. We're actually circumnavigating Tours. Tours is over to the right-hand side of the riders. We're just going to the south of Tours to come in from the southerly direction. And in fact, the race should not be finishing on the Avenue de Grammont, the very famous Avenue de Grammont this year, but the tram works that were taking place to cut up the whole of that avenue have actually been delayed, giving us one more chance at that magnificent finish for the sprinters. Look at the length of that main field.
Indian file here in the finale of Paris Tours. That's normal. The sprinters queuing up at the front, their teammates doing all the work here. There is the tip of the spear there, and you want to be in that melee somewhere to win this race. You want to be right up there in about the first 15 or 20. This is going to be tough for the 2 riders that went to the left of that. 4, 5, 6 riders now, and they're going to have to jump up on the curbs there to get back into the field. That's where you want to be. You want to be hovering around the front and making no mistakes and conserving as much energy as you can for the sprint at the end.
Well, there's a lot of riders being tailed off. If you look over to the right-hand side, then that's because of the pressure that is being applied at the front end of the main field. And there are a couple of teams doing that pacemaking. It's Team Rabobank, obviously, for Oscar Freire. Not a surprise to see him between Quickstep. Maybe Tom Bonin is hiding some form.
Maybe Tom Bonin will get up there in the finish. It would be great to see Tom have a good result to cap off his season. And this is a perfect race for his talents. Fletcher having another good ride here in a classic and a one-day race. This is the type of racing that he loves. He found the breakaway early, and these 4 riders are the last men out of that break that are still left off the front of the peloton.
Yeah, Bonin started the season off very, very well with a win at the Tour of Qatar, a couple of stages, finishing 3rd place overall. But after that, once he got to his one-day classics, he started to come up with this very bad knee problem, and it was a knee problem that he wasn't able to cure or sort out until the end of the season.
And he also came up against a very fit and flying Fabien Cancellara in Flanders and Roubaix. And Cancellara not in today's race, but Cancellara, one of the best one-day specialists and greatest time trials perhaps the sport has ever seen.
Well, certainly, he just wrote the record books again last week when he was the 4th time in his career the world individual time trial champion. This is the front end of the main field. Orange, the House of Orange, the Dutch team Rabobank, they really are putting the pressure on now. They've actually just signed up a new Australian for next year, young Michael Matthews, who won in dominant style the sprint in the men's under-23 World Time Trial Championships. In a sprint, I would have to say, Bob, a little bit a la Cavendish.
Yes, most definitely. He showed clean wheels to all of the riders. It was a very tight battle for 2nd and 3rd. In fact, 2 riders, they were identical. They could not separate, Taylor Phinney and the Canadian rider, so they had to share the bronze medal in the World Championships. First time that's ever happened.
I've never seen anything like that before. In fact, I didn't realize they changed the rules. Now, Radio Shack Attack, this is exactly what we've been waiting for. I think maybe a little early, Bob. 6 kilometers to go to the climb. I would have waited for the move until we actually got onto the slopes of this next climb, the Beausoleil.
Launching there off the front, 2 men, Vacances Soleil and Radio Shack. You don't want to attack, generally speaking, unless you have absolutely spectacular legs before a climb. More ideally, you wait for the gravity to take over from the aerodynamic drag of sitting on the wheel, and that's where you launch your attack. But when you feel good and the wheels say, let's go, you got to do it.
Well, I'm making around about 6 kilometers to go to the start of that climb, and the 4 leaders are holding on to a mere 10 seconds advantage. That's not very much more than around about 100 meters off the front end of the main field.
Second little group of 4 trying to get organized off the front to see if they can give the peloton the slip. There's our 4 leaders, so they're just coming across the gap, but the huge peloton is right on their wheels. It's going to be a catch here pretty soon. You can see the big group just behind.
Well, you can see these wide open spaces. They've come away from the forested area now, Bob, for maybe 4 or 5 kilometers. Once they get to the final 2 climbs, it's back inside the outskirts of Tours. They won't have to be hampered by the wind, but there is the whole of Paris Tours in not very much more than half a kilometer of distance.
And you can see in the background there the peloton fanned out across the road, and they are going absolutely flat out, probably 50 kilometers per hour, and there is not even 1 spare inch on a narrow road like this to move up. That's why you have to stay as close to the front as you can. When the road widens up again, then you have to attack for all you're worth to get to the front or get your sprinter up into position. And we're coming into the very last kilometers of this race. And you can see how narrow it is, and riders all over the place there going into that very narrow section of roadway.
Well, in fact, this group of 4 riders is about to come across and make the junction. That's going to make an 8-man leading group. I'm not quite sure who the rider is in there from Radio Shack, but it may well be Geoffroy Lecatre, the French rider on Radio Shack, as he comes to the front and makes the junction. So now we're looking at an 8-man leading group with 15 kilometers to go, but they've only got a 10-second advantage over the whole of the main field. We'll take a very short break and come back with more action. Well, tense moments now. We're not much more than 500 or 600 meters away from the start of the penultimate climb of the day, the Côte de Beausoleil. This leading group of 8 riders, Bob, I think they're a little bit nervous and concerned about the proximity of the main field. The main field, as same, are actually looking to set this race up now. A lot of riders from Quick Step at the front end of the main field. Now, this is the move by Geoffroy Lecatre.
Lecatre, they're launching off the front. He's got the freshest legs probably in the breakaway. 4 men from the original break throughout the racing. But Lecatre just came out of the field, got to the break, and now he's gone forward on this climb. We're going to see some serious attacking from the peloton, though.
Well, he's digging very deep here, Geoffroy Lecatre. He's split that group behind him, but you can be absolutely certain there'll be a lot of moves coming off the front end of the main field, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Philippe Gilbert, Pippo Pozzato, and maybe even Tom Bonen.
You never know. Here's the field now. They are just catching Fletcher there. Fletcher, pretty valiant effort by the Spaniard, and also Nicolas Maes coming back into the field. Just a couple of riders now dangling off the front, but big tempo being set throughout the day. Radio Shack having a good race so far. Geert Stegmans has been at the front throughout the racing, and Geoffrey Lecatre is off the front.
Well, Alexis Saramotins from HTC Columbia, Latvian national champion, he's dropping back into the main field. A lot of work is being done here by Team Katusha. Now, that is obviously for Pippo Pozzato, who's probably thinking about the next climb to lay down the foundations for his attack. Now, this is Lecatre. He's over the top of the climb. He's still looking at around about a 12 to 14 second advantage. This is a very good move for Radio Shack.
Great ride there by Lecatre. There's Thomas Vogler noodling it in off the back, so he'll just take his time to get to the finishing town. And this is the damage at the back of the field. Here's the chase group now. Perhaps they're setting something up for Geert Stegmans to make a counter move. Everybody in the peloton will have to chase Lecatre and take that very seriously. That might give Stegmans a chance to go forward after this rider has caught his teammate. Until then, he will just be watching his progress up the road, and that is a serious gap, and it's hard to drop 7 of the guys in the breakaway and go out on your own. But Lecatre obviously having good legs. Here's Tom Bonen now, perhaps in a little bit of trouble at the back of the race.
Well, look at the face of Tom Bonen. I don't think it's going to be his race here this afternoon, especially if he's sitting at the back end of the race with Thomas Vogler. So Team Quick Step are going to have to look to somebody else. Just looking here at Geoffroy Lecatre, he's been a professional, Bob, since 2004. He's only ever won 1 race in his whole professional career, and that was way back in 2008 when he actually won the Tour of Great Britain. Since then, he's hovered around on small teams at Cofidis and Agritubel. But this man here has made the right move at the right moment. 21 seconds advantage.
He's increasing his advantage there, and if he pulls this one off, that would be one of the greatest rides we've seen in a long time. That is a good move by Geoffrey Lecatre. And it's sad to see Tom Bonen off the back there. It's a very fine line between being rested and being fit in cycling, and you have to, if you get too tired, you can't make these accelerations. Also, if you're too rested and you haven't raced, which Bonen hasn't done for a while, it's also very tough to maintain the tempo in the finale of one of these great classics. So sad to see Tom Bonen dropped already. already in this year's Paris Tours.
Well, there's a couple of good riders also going off the back there from Omega Pharma Lotto. In fact, a recent winner of the Circuit Franco-Belge, Adam Blythe. But I think he's probably done a lot of work to set the race up for Omega Pharma Lotto and Philippe Gilbert. And also going backwards, Kenny De Hayes. Just looking at this gap, Bob, it's starting to stretch out now. 23 seconds. He's lining himself up for around about a kilometre or so for the final climb of this race. And that, of course, is the Côte de Lepont. And that's going to hit him right in the face like a hammer.
Most definitely like a hammer. A little bit of a climb here, and these have given a chance for some of the breakaways to get established in the past. The peloton doesn't seem to be too interested in that so far, but we're getting so close to the finish line. Unless you're the fastest man in the bike race, you have to take a little bit of a chance. And there was Philippe Gilbert right at the front of the head of affairs right now in the finale.
Well, I tell you what, this could be the big surprise here on the Côte de Lepont, because Geoffroy Lecatre, only one professional career victory, is now looking at staring down the barrel of a victory at Paris Tours, because he's up to 30 seconds advantage and there's no reaction in the main field.
Well, he is absolutely drilling it now. You can see him all over his bicycle there, trying his best. Here's some of the accelerations now from the field. Cofidis on the attack, Milram on the wheel, but it is an incredible ride by Lecatre to be able to increase his advantage now in the finale of this bike race.
Well, this is the lone leader. Oh, I tell you what, that's hurt that climb, hasn't it, Bob? He's gone over the top now. He's got to try and find a bit of pressure. Now, this has got to be Philippe Gilbert looking for the move, but you can see they're all over his back wheel. That's Pipo Pozzato in second position. These are the men we expected to make the move here, but they actually haven't opened up the gap.
That was a great move by Gilbert, and I think if you're trying to follow that wheel, you're going to be in a lot of pain. This man deep in the pain cave right now, Geoffroy Lecatre, trying to get to the finish line first, and if things break up in the field, he has a chance to win Paris Tours here at the very last moment, taking a perfect timing to try to get away. Incredibly tough for 8 kilometers to ride by yourself in front of this peloton, chasing hard now.
That'll be Bjorn Lukemans getting off the front there for Vacances Soleil. Rode very well also last week in the World Championships for the Belgian squad, trying to set up the victory for Philippe Gilbert. But I'm surprised, Bob, that they haven't actually managed the stranglehold. Maybe on this occasion we could be seeing a bit of a surprise with Lecatre surviving off the front end of the main field. But the big men we talked about, Gilbert, Pozzato, they're all watching themselves.
Well, you can see the breakup now in the field. So what you need is some teammates. Philippe Gilbert cannot do all the work by himself to close the gap to the breakaway and expect to win the race. So he needs his teammates, who've done a tremendous amount of work so far, to come to the front. This bike race might be all over, but the crying, it might be a race for second place now. That man trying to steal the show.
Well, 7 kilometers to go, 23 seconds advantage for Geoffroy Lecatre. We'll take a very short break and come back for the grand finale. Well, just looking down here at number 116, Geoffroy Lecatre, 6 kilometers to go, 4 miles of racing. It's pretty much downhill here, Bob, till we get to the finishing line of the Avenue de Gramont. 20 seconds advantage. I'm surprised that there's not been a major reaction in the main field. This could be the 4th time in the last 10 years that we go down to a settling out by the sprinters.
It would be an incredible upset if Lecatre was able to stay away. Seb Van Mark is the top Sport Vlaanderen rider that's caught in between in no man's land there. It would be almost a miracle if Lecatre could stay away to the finish line, and in an unbelievable upset in today's race.
Yes, but the upset for me really is the fact that Gilbert and Pozzato could not get away from the main field on that climb, the Côte de Lepont, and it's still in a very large main field. And in the past, at this point of the race, we've seen the race split into 3, 4, 5 different groups. This is a main field.
Well, Oscar Freira's got to be one of the hot favorites now, and he has his teammates from Rabobank on the front. But they're going to have to do a tremendous amount of work to nail this gap back, 17 seconds. And if Lecatre gets a little bit closer to the finish line and he still has that gap, he would also have to have the peloton turn off the gas for just a few hundred meters, and he would have a chance to win. I don't think that's going to happen, and the sprinters now starting to smell the finish line and putting their men on the front of the chase.
Yeah, but you know what, Bob? There are so many sprinters in with a chance here this afternoon, and I'm sure they will be licking their lips. They'll be looking at this red and grey jersey just ahead of them in the main field. Romain Felu of France could really create the big surprise for Vacances Soleil. Daniele Benati, of course, for Liquigas. He's got fine form and smarting a little bit that he wasn't included in the Italian World Championships team. And, of course, why not Bernie Eisel? We saw him for HTC Columbia looking very comfortable on the slopes of that climb.
Well, this being a French classic, we can't forget Jimmy Casper, the very fast French sprinter, one of the most successful sprinters in the French peloton. He'll be looking for a result. Also, Team Milram, they go away. They have lost their sponsorship, so all of those riders will be pretty desperate for some results so they can find a team for next year, including Gerard Schiolik. He's one of the fastest men in the peloton. Watch for him to be a factor also.
Well, it looks a little bit to me as if this is the shape of Matteo Tossato. It is Matteo Tossato. Now, he normally is a lead-out man for Tom Boonen. No Tom Boonen, get a bit of freedom. Look what he's doing for himself.
Absolutely. The word will come across the radio that Bonin's been dropped, so the rest of the quick-step riders can take their chance now. And if you're not a sprinter like Tossato is not, then it's a chance for you to go in the breakaway.
A little fractioning off the front end again. Bernie Eisel being very attentive. HTC Columbia there in second position. He's got good form at the end of this season. And of course, getting in there as well, you've got a rider from Caisse d'Epargne. That looks like Pablo Lastras.
Lastras, winner of the stage in the Tour de France, and Vacances Soleil also putting a man in this next little group. 5 kilometers for our leader. The gap is just over 10 seconds. 4 kilometers to go, and we'll see if he can do it. He's hanging on to that slim lead.
Well, he's just coming off the final few meters of this descent of the Côte de l'Épon, a couple of left-hand turns, and then all of a sudden he's in the outskirts of Tours. It's a very long finishing straight, one you've got to be very careful of, and in fact is a 3-kilometer straight to the finish line. And it's so great, Bob, to have a little bit of a reprieve there as we look at the 20-second advantage for Geoffroy Lecatre, because in theory this race, Paris Tours, should have been looking for a different area to finish, but they haven't yet repaved the street.
Well, this is a virtually impossible thing to do, is to go off the front in a race like this, of this stature, this long, and be able to hold that gap, and it is so unbelievably painful. So Geoffroy Lecatre having the race of his life so far, and if it leads to a win in this, that would be one of the best I've seen in a very long time. Great riding by that man, and you can see the suffering and pain and agony on Lecatre's face now. He is swimming in an ocean of lactic acid and trying to see that finishing banner before he gets swept up by the field.
Well, one tiny little climb remains, the climb of the Côte de Petit Pat d'Anne, and this is it. Now, this is a nasty little climb. It's only about 750 meters. You can see Vacances Soleil doing lots of work on the front end of the main field. Now, it's either for Bjorn Leukemans or it's for Romain Felu a little bit later on.
Caisse d'Epargne, Bernie Eisel sitting on the wheels, and that looks like Gilbert has a couple of guys still left with a little bit of energy. Geert Stegeman's trying to play the spoilers role, trying to slow this chase down a little bit because his teammate is up the road. He will not cooperate at all with anybody that's trying to close the gap. Fracturing in the field, not a concerted, organized chase of this man, and his gap hovering at 20 seconds. It's going to go right down to the wire.
At a moment like this, Lecatre has to put all of his thoughts into the back of his mind and just give everything that he possibly can to forcing his bike further forward. Matteo Tossato here, he's second man on the road. He's riding a good move here, getting across the gap. He's looking for around about 12 to 14 seconds, but the main field haven't given him a free ticket, have they?
Most definitely not. Chasing Tossato, I'm reminded of a stage he won in the Giro d'Italia. He got the pink jersey for a few days. Very similar circumstance, a couple of small climbs before the finish. He was able to give the field a slip on that occasion, but he hasn't been able to close the gap down too closely to this man right here, Geoffroy Lecatre. What a great ride.
Well, Tossato still halfway across the gap, and another rider, Top Sport Vlaanderen, trying to make the junction, but the main field is still very much together, and still they haven't split up at all. It is, I think, Bob, on this occasion going to go down to a day for the sprinters.
Well, we'll see about that. They have to close a pretty big gap now, and they'll be getting the messages from their team managers like, now is the moment, flat out, or we will not have a chance to win this race. Lecatre still hanging on to that very slim margin.
3 kilometers to go, 17 seconds advantage, and 2 more riders scuttling across the gap there. Looked like Nicky Terpstra, I think, the red, white and blue, the champion of Holland. He also rode well last week at the World Championships. He's come away all the way from Australia to participate in this race. That's him on the right-hand side, inside the Grammont.
Yeah, there it is. That's that long avenue we're speaking about. Gorgeous part of Tours here. Straight down to the finish line. He's going to get the red kite in just a couple of kilometers time, and he is still hovering there just under 20 seconds advantage, but look at the agony and suffering in the legs. He's pedaling squares, as they say, but holding on to a little bit of a lead.
Well, he's got the finishing sights in his finishing straight in his sights there, Bob. It's a long, long line. Watch out for this man. He made a move like this last week at the World Championships. He's got the power to survive off the front end of the main field, but Terpstra is not going to outwit the main field. Vacances Soleil, that's obviously for Romain Felu, but queuing up there as well. Big Geert Stegemans is right in there. He's got a teammate alongside alongside him to look after his position at the front.
I do not think he's going to get caught. It's going to be a race for second. Just 2 kilometers to go for our leader now. The peloton is now getting organized. There's the red flag with the finishing straightaway just in front of Le Quatre. What an incredible effort, and he feels like he can win this. He's not going to give up. He's not going to look back. He's going to do everything he can to win Paris Tours. The sprinters might have left it just a little bit too late before they got organized for the chase.
Well, I bet he wished that was the banner at 1 kilometer to go, but sorry, Geoffroy, that's 2 kilometers to go. This is an incredibly long straightaway. There is the main field getting themselves organized. They can see their prey just in front of them, but they've not yet got themselves organized to pull him back into the fold. He's still holding on to around about a 15-second advantage. Now look at the main field, left and right. Daniele Bernati's team Liquigas getting themselves organized. Romain Felu's team are in there as well. Jimmy Casper, he's got his team up there from Soja-Son.
Oh, baby, this is Le Quatre's. His dream is turning into a nightmare right now as the field is breathing down his neck. He's going to get the red kite in just a few hundred meters, and then it'll be a desperate survival to the finish line. If he can win this, what an incredible race that would have been.
17 seconds. He's looking up the road. He will shortly see the banner indicating 1 kilometer to go. You know, don't discount Anthony Ravin of AG2R, because I could see them organizing themselves at the front end of the peloton. He recently won the great Paris-Bourges race. 14 seconds, 1 kilometer to go. Bob, can he do it?
Is there any chance in the world that this man can stay away? If he looks over his shoulder, he can see the finish line, he can see the peloton, he has a chance, but now the sprinters can feel the finish line, so this is going to be an incredibly wild dash to the line.
It is hurting this man so much as he tries to find every last little bit of energy. Is he going to survive? He's probably only got about 100 meters advantage. The main field now starting to wind themselves up. There's Bernati. There is Oscar Freire up into 4th or 5th position.
Oscar Freire there, you can see he's on the wheel of the quick-step rider, and it's still the riders from Lotto leading out Philippe Gilbert. He has a fine sprint at the end of a long, hard race. Le Quatre just about to get caught.
It's all over for Geoffroy Le Quatre, and in the middle now, Philippe Gilbert is going to leave this down to the sprint to the line. Coming up to the line now, there's a big acceleration. It's the riders from Vacances Soleil coming around the outside. It's a rider from Lampre has got it now. This is the big organization. Looking over to the Lampre rider, that's going to be Bull. That's a phenomenal performance. Now coming up through the middle is Gerd Stegemans. There is Oscar Freire. It looks like he's tucked in the middle there in the orange jersey. Freire is trying to come up to the line, and he makes it. Oscar Freire, he gets the victory he's been looking for in Paris Tours. Well, Bob, you have to be sorry for Geoffroy Le Quatre. That was a tumultuous sprint coming up to the line there with riders left and right, but Oscar Freire, let's have a look at it one more time. Freire at this point, Bob, was very much boxed in.
Most definitely. He had to shoot through a couple of little gaps there. He had to reorganize his sprint, go back towards the center of the road. He started the sprint to the left. Now he goes back to his right and just is barely able to overcome the Lampre man. Great sprint by Oscar Freire.
I think that was Danilo Hondo up there. 41, Oscar Freire. Well, I tell you what, he was so very close last week in the World Championships. He does know how to rise to the big occasions. Oscar Freire wins Paris Tours.
Absolutely. Freire knows the moment. He takes his chances. He's a very, very crafty bike racer. I always love watching Oscar Freire. He's such a classy athlete. If he has a chance, he always comes up with the good, and that's the hallmark of a great professional.
Well, Lampre tried to set it up there for Angelo Furlan, actually, who faded to 2nd place on the line, but nobody can take it away from the man they call Il Gatto, because he's pounced once again. He came out of that box, and he got himself the victory.
Speed, endurance, tactics, and a great team. With Oscar Freire, you can't lose.
Well, here is confirmation of the top 10. Oscar Freire getting himself the victory just ahead of Angelo Furlan of Italy. Belgians Gerd Stegemans and Radio Shack in 3rd place. A little bit further down, the French sprinter Romain Felu in 6th. Bernie Eisel not bad there in 9th place, and rounding out the top 10, Sebastian Chavanel. Well, it certainly was a race for the sprinters here this afternoon. In 3rd position there for Radio Shack, the Belgian Gerd Stegemans getting his award. On the far side, the Italian sprinter on Team Lampre, Angelo Furlan. But the man who made the best sprint to the line, right through the mayhem in the middle, the Spaniard, this man, Oscar Freire. That's Stegemans. He was looking for the victory this afternoon, rounding off what has been, I think, a very difficult season for him, and writing his name once again into the history books. Oscar Freire becoming the first Spaniard ever to win Paris Tours. So that just about wraps it up from here in France, but it's already time to start looking towards 2011. And this Tuesday, October the 19th, we'll have a look at the 2011 Tour de France route announcement streaming live on Versus.com. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And don't forget to check in with Versus.com for the latest articles and videos, including what Bob Roll has to say about the developing Alberto Contador situation. We'll try and keep you up to date, and follow us on Twitter at VS Cycling. So congratulations to a great win by Oscar Freire. On behalf of Bob Roll, I'm Paul Sherwen saying we'll all be back next year with Versus Cycling.